In this video I'm going to be going over saving data to a file. In this case it's going to be in JSON. The reason I kept this topic a bit broad because it covers a bit more than just outputting something to JSON. It's more about issues that I've faced with certain aspects of Unity and saving certain objects from Unity. Okay, so in the last video I went over the video options. So in this case we can change the full screen and ultra, set the FOV to 100. Now we can hit this button and save. In the console there's a very detailed log of what's going on. This also saves to a file, so if anything does go wrong I've got some sort of trail to go back on to see what went wrong. So what actually happens when we hit this save button down here? So let's go down to save. It calls options UI.save settings, which evidently is here. So this doesn't actually do anything, but rather it calls two different methods in the video controller. So the video controller is on persistent game object. So the persistent game object is just one object in the scene which is not destroyed over scene changes, but also kind of like a central hub for scripts which really have no place on other objects, such as the assets that can be on anything, and the same with the video settings controller. That has to be persistent for a reason we'll get to in a minute. So when we apply the settings, these are the Unity methods which we use to set the video options. It's not really special, it's just called in Unity based methods which change the texture resolution and field of view. So what we have here is also a backup. So when we discard things, we want to discard the settings as well. And all this does, we've got a private instance called old options, is when we first call it, we use it as the old options. It's essentially the last known good configuration. So if we change something and we decide no, I want to quit out this menu and not apply it, that's what we do, and then we just discard everything and then update all the text back to how it was. Nothing in terms of the backend, in terms of quality, is ever changed. So this applies the settings, which is fine. But now we've applied the settings, we want these settings to be persistent over not only scenes but over game sessions. So if I open it, change direction to how I like it, and then close the game, I want those options to be back there and how I left it before in a way that I liked. So that's where save settings comes into play. This is also called from options UI. It's called straight after apply settings. The reason these are split up, because there might be a case where we want to apply the settings but not save them, so it makes more sense just to separate them slightly, then call them one after the other. And all this does, it's a pass-through method to the to the private variable, which is current options. So even though this is public, we do it through here because it's a lot easier, safer, but also it's safer rather than calling this directly, because if we call this directly we could have 2 or 3 places conflicting for the same options. Well, if we all go through this one method, it helps keep things in a nice orderly fashion. So now we're back to video options. So what this does, it just saves these variables here to file, and this file is here. Nothing special, just the name and the values they represent. So the issue that I had with some of Unity's objects is the resolution. Because when you try to save this, if this was a resolution and not a res, which is a custom object, just shorthand for resolution, nothing is saved. I have still not figured out why, but it just doesn't. So, what I've done to combat this is I've just made it resolution. And what it does is it's just got height and width, and essentially it's kind of almost like a middleman between Unity's resolution object, which is this, which is just height, width, height, refresh rate. And there's just a few implicit operators to kind of go back and forth without really any knowledge that this is actually happening in the background. Sorry, spelling mistake. So while this does have a constructor, this is perfectly fine because we call it here. In fact, resolution text. Yep, so we can see the way we set the resolution is through Unity's version of resolution. So these are just the available resolutions for the screen that is currently being played on. And these come from screen.resolutions, which is Unity's built-in array of every resolution that this screen can handle. So when it comes down to our custom res object, so what we do is we say, okay, when we use res, if we try to use the Unity version of the resolution like our own, so if we try to set, where's video options, this res as a Unity version of resolution, we can convert it back into our version using this. Essentially, it just strips out the refresh rate, which is stored in another variable somewhere in Unity, which is fine because we can get that whenever we want. And if we ever have to return our object into a Unity object, we can do that just by telling them the height and width, but also we can just get the refresh rate from application.targetFramerate, and just makes Unity happy because now it has a resolution that it can work with. So this resolution, this res, can be saved. I'll say that as I hit save. Into JSON. Now we can convert to and from, which is perfectly fine. So now that we've got saving down for that, we can essentially do the same with stats. So the stats are much easier because all of them are just uints, which is just unsigned int, so a very large int, and they're just numbers, so they can just be saved and stored like they were with the video options. As you can see, there's not very much to it. So if we ever try to get the stats, we just check the file. If there is no file, we generate one, so there's a template to follow. And then we just load in the JSON, we convert it to the object. If there's not an instance, like a saved cached version, we just set that as the cached version, and then we just return the instance. Then the save stats is just we convert it from the object to JSON and write it to a file. Not very complicated. So, I earlier said that this component, the video settings controller, had to be persistent for a reason. I touched on this in a previous video, I'm not exactly sure which one, but over scenes there is some issues with some settings being persistent, such as the camera field of view is not saved over, and I believe nor is the texture quality. I think that's per scene. So what we do, just to set, this is just make sure there's a public static instance, and if there If for some reason there's more than one instance of this video controller, we just want to remove it. And this delegate here is very useful. This is the only way to detect when the active scene has changed. And all we do is just reapply the video settings every time the new scene is changed. So we've got the video options saved, we can convert them to and from a file. So what we're going to do is every time the scene changes, we just want to reapply all of those settings. One, as peace of mind that we know we're actually doing it, and two, so that any options which are not persisted over scenes are then changed back to how the player wanted them to. So that is it. Just double checking through everything to make sure I've covered everything. In-game UI, yes, main menu, weapons. Yes, I might make a separate video of some of these very generic scripts down at the bottom. Okay, I'll see you in the next video, which I will cover these very generic scripts down at the bottom. Okay.